Hello, everyone. It is August 1st, 2018, and we're super excited to have a webinar with Ansible, and our guest star today is Jason Edelman from Network to Code. He is the founder, the head guru, the master of network automation, and we're very fortunate to have him here today. My name is Sean Kavanaugh. I'm the technical marketing manager for Ansible Network Automation. I also have Carrie and Andreas, who are on the Red Hat Ansible team to help with questions. As with all webinars, this will be recorded. We always get asked. This will be on demand on our website. People can look at it in any time zone. Unfortunately, since we're on East Coast, we happen to always put our webinars in East Coast time. With that, I want to do a couple slides and talk about what some high-level items today. Let's see if I can actually click. So I want to talk about a couple upcoming events. I want to talk about Ansible 2.6 that launched and a link to the porting guide. And of course, these slides will be available with links for you guys. And then we're going to let Jason talk about our main topic today, which is integration of automation in existing business processes. And he's going to do a little ServiceNow, little Tower, and kind of talk about what he's seeing with his customers and talk about Network to Code and what they're doing for customers today and kind of his journey into network automation. So the big event, Carrie's been working her butt off getting this event planned. She's already been down to Austin, I think at least once already, going to different event spaces. So Ansible Fest Austin 2018, this is our first two-day event. We will have a dedicated networking track. So if you want to only go to talks for network automation, we will have a bunch of talks just on network automation. We will have the schedule posted soon. We're working our butts off to get that posted. I know a lot of people are waiting to see what talks are going to be there, what's exciting, but go ahead and try to get your tickets booked now while the prices are low. I think the prices gradually get up and up as the event gets closer. I'm super excited. I'm also excited there's a direct flight from Raleigh to Austin now, so it makes it easy for me. We put it right in the middle of the country, so hopefully everyone in North America, it makes it easy. I know some other parts of the world were upset they weren't getting their fest, but that's why we had all the Automates events. And I just got back from Australia doing workshops every day. So hopefully every country will have workshops or something going on. We'll get that posted on our website. F5 Agility, this is August 13th through 16th. We will have a booth. One of our employees, Eric McElroy, will have a talk. So if you want to learn F5 in automation, definitely come to Agility. F5 is a great partner, and we actually have some news with some of their new modules today. So Ansible 2.6 has launched, I forget what date, pretty recently. We just had a big blog post about it, but I just wanted to cover really briefly before I hand it over to Jason, some of the new stuff out there. So we had made the Network CLI plugin a top-level connection method, and a lot of people have seen that. Pretty much every webinar for the last 5 webinars have been talking about Network CLI. You still had to use the provider method if you were using NX API or eAPI. What we've done is we've made HTTP API a top-level connection method, and it can key off the Ansible Network OS to use an eAPI or NX API for those 2 respective platforms. We also have a bunch of new modules. These net modules are agnostic modules that just also key off of the Ansible Network OS. You'll see there's netget, netput using Network CLI, and netconf get, netconf RPC. RPC is a remote procedure call, which is part of the netconf spec. So there's some new modules you should check out if you haven't seen them yet. In addition, we've added additional platform support, which might be more interesting. We have Cisco Meraki. We have 2 more platforms from Extreme Networks. F5, which is the news I want to circle back on, has made a bunch of big IQ modules. So not only can you manage big IP, but you can manage big IQ as well. The Infobox modules were added in 2.5, but now they're fully supported with your Red Hat subscription. So that's something to look at if you want an end-to-end support SLA for all of the Infobox needs. And then finally, Ubiquity Edge OS is a platform that we now support with Ansible Network Automation. There's also a porting guide. We get asked quite often, if I already have existing playbooks, how do I port them? There's literally a porting guide with every release, and there's a link right here, and there's a specific network section that they've worked hard on, the developers. So check out the porting guide if you want to use the new stuff, the new hotness. With that, I'm going to pass the ball to Jason and let him introduce himself. I think I can just make him presenter here. Boom. We'll give him a second to do it, and I'll put myself on mute. And again, I'll be looking at the questions with Carrie and Andreas, and feel free to ask questions, and I'll kind of prompt Jason if there's something I kind of want to interrupt with, or he just has a question. Thank you very much.
Okay, great, everybody. Can you see my screen, Sean?
Yes. Oh, wait, no, not yet. Can you see it?
Not yet.
Okay, we can't see it yet.
It looks like it's automatically pausing. Let's see here.
I have your, if the deck hasn't changed, I can share it too, and you can just say next if that's easier.
Yeah, I'll try one more thing here. This looks like the app didn't work. How's this?
Yes.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. Let me go into, let's see here. Let me go into full screen mode. Okay, great. Okay, cool. So thanks. All right, thanks, Sean, for kicking things off. So in this session, we're gonna spend some time talking about network operations and look at different integration points that we could have hooked into Ansible Tower to really just think about integrating a network operation specifically into more structured IT workflows using ServiceNow, but also integrate those same workflows into a chat program like Slack, offering a bit more flexibility in day-to-day operations within the network domain. So just as I go through this, let me see here. Okay, cool. So who am I? As Sean said, my name is Jason Edelman, and in these sessions, I'd like to point out that I am a network engineer by trade. Oftentimes now, I might say a former network engineer who's turned into a automator, and this is largely because of the trends in the industry that started out, back in really 2000. I will say 2010, when SDN first became a thing, and it gradually evolved. And in about 2013, 2014, it became apparent that there wasn't really a huge problem set with, let's say, a control plane and data plane separation, but there was just a huge gap in the market around day two operations and the overall management of a given network. And around the same time, vendors started coming out with APIs on network devices. This was around the same time as there was some of the first initial plugins, even back then, into Ansible for a network automation. And I saw some of these plugins get built. And at the time, I was doing a lot of architecture and design work, working for a combination of vendors and integrators and VARs along the way, and realized, spent a lot of time architecting and designing networks, sometimes getting them installed and then leaving and going to the next client. But it was really that day two mark where operations was the challenge. That was really where the real challenge began. And out of that was Network to Code was born in 2014. So overall, as a company, we are now solely focused in the network automation space. And so we treat ourselves as a next-gen consulting and integration company. So everything that we do is around looking at operations, workflows, looking at how the equipment, how the devices and infrastructure is currently being used. And this goes from routers, switches, VPNs, firewalls, and whatever other tooling that exists. It could be tools for SNMP monitoring, things like that, and how these systems are used, how data is gleaned from one tool into the next. And so overall, as a organization, we're very focused around network automation services as well as training. Again, here, spend a quick minute on that, but a combination of our services varies in size and scope, from getting started with network automation to custom development to doing a combination of both in trainings, workshops, and even longer term enablement programs to really help our clients on that network automation journey, going from zero, meaning managing networks in that traditional manner using the CLI, to getting them to a better spot in that journey, which is leveraging network automation platforms like Ansible Tower along the way. Okay, and again, our vision, it really is to revolutionize the way networks are deployed, consumed, and managed. So it's so important to think about the key word of consumption, because even though you may automate certain tasks, oftentimes we're automating those tasks for other teams and trying to enable them. So it's really important as us as an organization, as maybe yourself, as you think about adopting network automation within an IT department, on how you may expose services for other teams to consume and what utilities make sense. And that's largely what we're discussing today, because it's really not a great thing if tools are deployed and they're not used. So here, as an example, today we're largely going to be focusing around having network automation deployed and giving different vehicles to consume some of those workflows. As an example, today we'll be looking at ServiceNow and Slack, but those can be generic ITSM tools and chat tools as well. So as we kind of get into really the heart of the presentation, we're going to spend just a brief few minutes looking at operations of yesterday, today, and tomorrow, meaning a traditional model of really managing the network as we always have, and then go into that notion of integrating business process, business workflow with Ansible Tower specifically, and then look at oftentimes what enterprise organizations have is, instead of opening up change tickets and change requests for these common changes that haven't had an impact in the past several months or several years, is being able to execute these pre-approved change directly from Slack or a chat program, all through and via Ansible Tower along the way. I don't think we'll have time for the live demo. We'll see how we do end up. Otherwise, largely what we've put together is a slideshow that will go screen by screen to really make sure the demo gods weren't upon us. But we'll go through this, and again, feel free to interject, ask questions on the chat as well as we go through this. All right, cool. So what we're going to go through here is general network operations, and this hasn't changed really fundamentally in the past 2 decades. Now, when we think about network operations, this is really how we support and manage the network day to day. And included in this is really, from the start, we receive equipment, we unbox it, console into the device. Oftentimes people will say we're going to load a script onto the device, and not to be confused with a legitimate script or an automation workflow, but copy and paste, maybe an instruction set on changing the 2nd octet, 3rd octet on a given IP scheme for a new branch site. So if it's 2nd octet per site, change X, change the 4th octet for based on where it exists in the network. So this is really what we've done for the past 20 years, and really why right now there's such a large growing adoption of network automation, where we're seeing that there's a higher amount of variable change within the network domain. And the truth is, the network domain and the network elements have really, I'll say, always lagged behind other domains, starting with looking at systems and even things within the enterprise, like a vCenter, to right-click clone a VM, or we look at what Ansible has done in the past decade on managing systems infrastructure. Now what we have is starting to think about how we learn from the other domain administrators and how to leverage some of the same efficiencies that they've leveraged along the way. So we have a network engineer managing every device via a keyboard, and it just becomes really unscalable. And it's really, in addition to that, it's just start thinking about the business outcomes and how deterministic making changes or even gathering of data. And as we go through this and discuss network operations, we're specifically not trying to focus on the configuration of devices at all times. And again, some of the demos and the slideshows that we're going to be going through, here it actually is making a change on the network. but oftentimes, and this is a network engineer gathering data it could be via show commands and putting them into a report or doing a compliance check. There's really, it's really so much more than just speeding up configurations or doing them faster. I want to think about doing things in a bit more of a repeatable and deterministic way. Now, as we move forward and think about managing more devices or extending the team based on the variety of use cases that exist for managing different enterprise networks, from campus, branch, data center, DMZ, whatever it might be, what's been so common is to just open recs. Let's just open a rec. We're going to hire more folks, and maybe there's a ratio of a network engineer, per n devices. Whatever the number is. Maybe it's 100, maybe it's 200, maybe it's less based on the network domain that is currently being managed under their scope. And this is the part that I think we really have a closer eye on now, is how can we limit and minimize the need to continuously hire network engineers, tens or hundreds or more of them, as the network growth continues, right? From logical networking devices to physical networking devices to various use cases that again might be relevant for different verticals that exist. So ultimately, what we're seeing is that shift from, instead of really looking at scaling out the team so much for every new network, every end network nodes, let's try to leverage more efficient tooling to allow the network to grow. And we'll see on the bottom right, we're going to scale out the network to be able to, in this very, very small example, we have, let's say, four network engineers up top that can now manage a larger network. So we're going to be able to scale out, and oftentimes it is sometimes around scaling out that the early adopters around automation, because there really is a problem on trying to manage larger networks. But it's really, the hard part is managing the larger network, but maintaining the confidence and the reliability of the operations along the way. Or oftentimes, there's just been, if there's an influx of issues or change requests, so common today in the network space are firewall change requests, or making a change to a VIP, right? We really want to have that same reliability as we continue to scale out the network. And really, the only way to start to do this as networks become even larger, both logically and physically, is to leverage efficient tooling, right? So what we're looking at here is really inserting Ansible Tower, which is going to really own that communication to the various device types, right? And again, we're not going into the details here of the communication mechanisms. It's really what's important for what we're talking about today. But as Sean mentioned, there's even the latest version, there's newer connection types that exist, right? So we can leverage Tower to communicate the SSH, RESTful APIs. There's extensibility to really say whatever the device is, if there is a way to communicate to it with an API, there is a way to manage that device with Ansible Tower. And this goes from wireless devices to, again, as we said, routers, switches, firewalls, but this even could be UC and collaboration domains as well. And the more technology domains that are looked at within a given workflow, really the richer it becomes back to the business. So ultimately, what we're starting to do is change the model. Instead of requiring that new person, it's just saying, well, let's have some predefined things that are very, very common. Let's start there. Insert Ansible Tower in the center to really help us along the way to scale out while maintaining that reliability. So once we've inserted Ansible Tower here, the opportunities really become endless. And so what we're seeing here is we have our network engineers now start leveraging automation tooling like Tower. So we'll say now we have a network automator, right? So this network engineer for common requests, and it could be to gather serial numbers for a renewal of contract, right? A lot of vendors, have, some sort of renewal annually that might require you to gather serial numbers, or might require you to, let's just do a quick check to see what the OS versions are on all of our devices to see if they're running a compliant version of OS. Things like that can be automated. So, and of course, there are things like the typical, change requests along the way as well to make a configuration change on the network. But once we have a Tower integrated here, it allows us to layer on top tools like ServiceNow that we're showing today to dynamically integrate to those workflows, right? Which means we could now integrate to the business process. And that is one of the things that I really want to highlight, because there's oftentimes, there's very strict procedures for opening tickets, updating a ticket as an example. Well, you might now be going into your ITSM like ServiceNow, opening up a change request, and then logging into Ansible Tower, maybe filling out a few fields, clicking submits, and then for verification, maybe you still go to the device and validate a change actually took. So issue a show command, and then based on compliance and regulation, maybe you need the show command outputs, and we're going to put that back into a ticket, really kind of looking at the various steps to make sure the processes are adhered to within the IT department, leveraging ServiceNow that has all the approvals required as well, which would then enable you to go make that change. Right, today it could be manual, tomorrow it could be through something like Ansible Tower, as we're going to be showing here today. And even beyond, as we go through this slide deck, we'll say, well, it gets even better because here we're leveraging ServiceNow, and oftentimes we do want a little bit more agility and the flexibility that Ansible offers, and even that some things like chat offers us. So what we're going to talk through as well, and we'll show via our slides, is what it looks like to have chat integration into Tower to execute those predefined workflows. Okay, this is critical, and these workflows, again, do not have to be making a change on the networks. As we go through this, just keep in mind, try to think about a clean slate on common things that are performed day to day, from aggregating command sets, issuing a show LDP neighbor, looking at the neighbor on a given interface and correlate that interface to a specific counter on that interface, right? So it could be the correlation of data between commands, could be config change, right? It could be, does this firewall rule already exist on the firewall? Maybe not make the change, but just do a yes no check or a Boolean check. Does this thing already exist on the device, which we see quite common for firewalls and VIPs and things like that, to see, well, what are the active servers behind a given VIP, as an example. Okay, so what we're going to do now is walk through really screenshot by screenshot to see what this would look like. Okay, so here what we are showing is some web forms that have been built into ServiceNow. So everything we're showing on the left hand side, like these network tasks as an example, help desk port assignments, all of these tasks are a front end within ServiceNow. So we'll call these our custom web forms to gather the data that is needed to make a given change, right? So doing this makes it a lot cleaner. So it's not just getting one large text block within a notes prompt within a ticket. These are very specific forms that will exist within, or could exist within, a ServiceNow. And so what's going to happen here is once we click on submit, we're going to gradually see what goes on. But even before we do that, we'll look at the first one we see here is switch port management. Maybe that's going to be select the device name, switch port, device type, right? So this one is more of a network centric task, but not shown in the slides, like a help desk port assignment as an example. It's very popular to hear where there's Jack IDs, and we're talking about now wiring closets in the campus, right? Which again, keep in mind, there's often lots of talk about data center network automation, but there's often more variable change within the campus. for reassigning a port from a guest user to a printer VLAN to a IP phone or an access point, things like that. So help desk port assignment, that basically allows somebody that works in a different team to select in the drop-down menu, the Jack ID, right? So maybe it's, building one, Jack ID is 001. Of course, we need that data to be correct and mapped on the back end to a specific IDF wiring closet and a given port. And then they would select in that drop-down a type of device, IP phone, access point, things like that. Okay, so really flexible with what's possible and how to start to consume this automation, right? So we just blow this up a little bit. Now we're going to fill out the switch port management fields from device name, switch port, right? Things like that. And then we're going to basically at this point click submit on this request, right? So what happens as soon as you click submit, as you would expect within a ticketing tool, an ITSM tool like ServiceNow, this is going to generate a change request, right? So we're going to see here that there are things that might be predefined, or it could be, things like, short description or justification, right? Things like that based on the overall policy that you wish to have, and then the state of the ticket as well. So right now it's still in the assess state, because all this what's been done now is this has been requested. Right, at this point, a workflow is going to be followed and adhered to that should map to what you currently do. So this isn't about trying to change your process necessarily for automation, but to follow a current process. Okay. So what we're showing here is now we just kind of bumped up the ServiceNow screenshot. So we're still looking at change. Let's call it 3340. This is prepped and staged a Ansible playbook to be executed from Tower, right? So this is the part that we're seeing here, that the 3340 is now in basically a scheduled job to run. Now there are checks and balances in there, so things run according to plan. But at this point, this is there's various things that are possible with the scheduling and timing and things like that. But the main point here is the ServiceNow portal is communicating to Tower to schedule a pre-built job, right? So within Tower, we would have things like job templates pre-built for these common changes. These common changes are going to be everything that would be in the left-hand panel in ServiceNow as an example. So for this little demo, VLAN switch ports, things of that nature. And now as we go through this, we're seeing the inside of the ticket with our description that has all the fields that were entered, right, for tracking purposes. This way, for folks that aren't technical, that want to continue to really explore the ticket, they have the ability to track the ticket to see where it's at. So we go from ServiceNow communicating to Tower to get this job prepared for us, not executed just yet, and then continuously reviewed along the way, within our ServiceNow instance here. Okay, so now what happens? Let's say I requested this change, and I'm the system administrator. So this screenshot is showing some sort of system administrator who's trying to configure a switch port. So what happens is then I leave because my change has been requested, and in our instance now, Fred Luddy becomes our approver. Okay, so the requirements here is Fred logs in. He's going to go to his open tickets that need approval. Right, we'll go through them, and at this point, this is showing the inside of the ticket. So it was requested. Fred is the approver, and now we have some various buttons, and this is still within a ServiceNow. So these buttons exist in ServiceNow. Now you also define this workflow, right? So again, the notion here is just showing different ways to consume the playbooks that will be executed by Tower, right? At the end of the day, that's what we're doing. So you can have various approvers. Now for what we're doing here, Fred logs in, Fred approves it. Okay, once Fred approves it, we can continuously look at two things, and this is with respect to ServiceNow. At the top part, it is scheduled, and we also see within the notes, if we were just at the bottom of the ServiceNow portal, we start to see that Fred logged in, approval for approved by the network team. Okay, so at this point, the job is ultimately scheduled. So keep in mind that what we're showing here are the what we'll call oftentimes safe changes, pre-approved changes, right? But what happens from here, Fred could have been the one who enters the time into when he approves it. We'll enter the time that this should happen, or it could be defaulted to the next change window, if it's Wednesday or Friday, Wednesday and Saturday, whatever they might be. Again, for this mock-up and for this demo, we're saying the only thing that is required from Fred is for him to log in, click approve, then this becomes scheduled. Okay. Now, screenshot, I just went to the next slide. Only a very subtle change occurred here. Now, what we're seeing is once the job is scheduled, then it's just waiting to begin. And this is basically within Ansible Tower that the schedule occurs, right? So that now what we've done is leveraged within Ansible 2.5. There's been ServiceNow modules that exist to write back into a ServiceNow ticket. Okay, so what we've done is actually have the link written into the ticket for the standard out that you would typically see, let's say on your Linux box, and that the link within Tower to look at the streaming standard out in real time. Again, should you want to see it in real time, which is always an option, but for predefined changes, more than likely you're not going to watch it. But you can click this link to, even when the ticket's closed, to go back and look at the standard out, for that job. Okay, so this is a task in that playbook that would write to the ticket to say, well, the job is about to begin. Okay, again, this could be within our playbook. It could be an email as well. It could be, this is about to begin, notifying the right teams. But this is all a matter of now we can have more granularity, because as a human, we don't want to say change is about to begin and have 3 or 4 or 5 entries. But here we can actually track these types of changes every step along the way. And each of these updates, as we'll see in the next really 2 or 3 slides, every update will really just be 1 or more tasks within our playbook. So as we continue forward, let's see what we have next. Okay, cool. So what we're showing here is we have our output, right? This was the standard out to look at this happen in real time. Now, ultimately, what occurred here is you have the ability to build in pre and post compliance checks within the playbook as well. What we're showing here is really just like the proof the change was successful. So we're showing that in this request that we made a change to Gigi 101, and we now see it has the right VLAN and the right description and all this data. And like this data should map back to what we entered, from that ServiceNow web portal, right? But based on this is all a matter of a preference, right? If you'd rather have a show command before the change, make the change, show command after the change, you would then see the before and after as well. Okay, so really, and if there's reachability testing, if you're making, it could be a routing change, whatever it might be, right? So it's really, this is where there's a lot of flexibility, where it's up to the network automation engineer that is writing these playbooks to really determine what you would want to see back within the ticket, or what the the process folks that for approvals want to see in the ticket, to really ensure that there is the assurance the change went as successful. Okay, cool. So everything that we just looked at, all those screens, right, all via Tower, right? So that one was a walkthrough really of switch port management, but any one of these, right? It's really defining the inputs for a common change, defining the logic of what you'd want to see before the change, after the change, and just to have that confidence in doing that. Okay. Okay, cool. So as we alluded to earlier, kind of, we'll say, it gets, a little bit, better than this, right? As we said, in terms of looking at, Slack integration and so forth. So ultimately, what we've done is just have a ticketing system like ServiceNow be used as it is today, but have the system itself issue the required commands for validation, well, as far as making the change and doing the validation, right? And again, think through that workflow in terms of if there are folks opening tickets to say, well, is this true or false? Like, does this file policy exist? Is this VIP currently in use? Or, some of those like predefined things that happen quite a bit, and it's not necessarily making a change. Even those types of asks to the network team, right? Opening and getting routed these tickets, as an example, all of those, could be integrated into the service, the ServiceNow portal. Okay, cool. All right, so now what we'll show is just a few screenshots of the overall Slack integration as well. And keep in mind, what we're going to end up showing is the same exact workflow that's driven, we'll say, top down from Ansible Tower. Okay, and it's a key, and this is where there's flexibility with how things are done with the enterprise. What we're showing here is this is top down from Tower down. But meanwhile, let's say the use case is, well, we just proved out, ServiceNow can successfully make a change through Ansible Tower to the device. And that has to wait for an approver to approve it to then get properly scheduled and deployed on a network or in a given network. But we're saying maybe with certain changes, you're okay if they can happen in real time. You know what? This is just adding a VLAN to a switch globally, not even assigning it to a switch port. Maybe it's collecting data, or maybe it's just bouncing a port, right? Again, oftentimes when we look at automation, there is a lot of how can we enable other teams to do what they do more efficiently, and maybe we try to offload some tasks to them. So it could be bouncing a switch port, or checking a VLAN in the campus to make sure if it's the right VLAN for an IP phone or an access point or a printer, things of that nature, right? So what we're going to see here is in Slack, for those who aren't aware, this is a group chat program that is very popular, that exists, and there's the notion of slash commands where you could do anything from slash invite somebody to a channel, or slash reminder for yourself. But these slash commands can also be built to perform custom actions as well. Right? Again, this is just a good way to get started with Slack integration, without going down the full-blown path of, let's say, a custom full-blown bot, as an example. Right? So there's 5 that were mocked up for this demo, and that are a bit more popular with our clients. But in terms of VLAN management, help desk config port, switch port, and all of these mapped back to what we saw in ServiceNow, because at the end of the day, like, these are communicating with particular playbooks that exist within Ansible Tower. Okay, so we have these slash commands, and what we're going to show on the next slide is we're going to see a screenshot of a Slack window. And originally, we oftentimes use different icons and bot names based on the presentation. So we felt like this one here, we kept Mickey Mouse because we were recently in Orlando at a conference. So just in the feeling of Disney, so we'll use Mickey Mouse as our bot here. But this is where it gets really cool with the enterprise to really have maybe try to make this a bit more fun with what you name your bot, or your, let's say, the individual that's going to respond. Maybe you want to give them a real name and not tell folks that it's actually a machine that can kind of get fun. Okay. So anyway, so we have slash commands. Yep.
Jason, can I ask a couple questions from the audience just to make it interactive, or you want to wait till the end?
Yeah, sure.
One of the questions, I thought that was a good question, and I have an answer, I guess, but you're probably better to answer this. Would you have the playbook check ServiceNow to see if it was actually approved before applying the commands? Is there a better way?
So Jeff, yeah, so we're actually doing that. Well, so anything's possible, right? And this is where, you know, the enterprise, you know, can drive what's required. As an example, with what we are showing here, and you know, we don't have a screenshot of like the playbook that's running, but the playbook that created, you know, this demo, the playbook does run. And if hypothetically, if it was scheduled and it runs, like the very first task in that playbook, it does use the snow record module to check the status of it. And if it's not approved, playbook fails, right? Now it's so I would recommend that, you know, especially for those who want to integrate with ServiceNow. So that would be, you know, my response. I don't want to dictate policy, but yeah, I think it would be a good thing to check to see the current state of the ticket, because that module, or that Ansible module snow record, it returns like the state of the ticket. So you'll get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 back based on the state, and you can define, well, only move forward if it's in the approved state. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's cool. I think you actually asked for like, I think I got 2 or 3 questions about the same thing. I think you answered them all, and as similar to what I was going to say, but no, it was really good. All right, just continue on. I thought it would just be fun to interact a little bit. So
yeah, no, definitely.
Stop talking to yourself.
Yeah, yeah, no, exactly. Appreciate it. And so on that note, though, even what we're showing here, I'll make mention of it because I may not have done that for Slack. What we're saying, well, now we're going to run those same playbooks, but it's not driven from ServiceNow. So now what do we do? So what we're gonna see is this Slack command is going to hit Tower playbook, because this is now meant for a real-time change, a little more flexibility for the ops team. The change begins in real time. So we're actually saying no open change needs to be open prior to running a slash command. But what we're doing here is for the enterprise type of compliance and tracking is, well, the playbook is still going to run, but instead of checking the state to make sure a ticket is opened, we're just going to open a ticket, right? So we're now just going to open a ticket to still track every change made through Slack. Otherwise, you end up with these parallel efforts saying, okay, well, you know, ServiceNow is going to track everything from ServiceNow, and Slack, well, it's pre-approved, so it's okay if it happens in real time. We're saying, well, no, we can take a step back and say, well, we already have playbooks being built that have our workflow predefined, that have ServiceNow integrations. Let's just leverage that to just, again, with a single task, let's just open a ticket and have the same output in there for compliance and reporting and things of that nature. So yeah, so the flexibility is really there to do a lot of this. But in general, we'll move forward here. We'll say /config switch port, really cool thing that possible via Slack. Like Slack is more well known right now for receiving alerts, you know, an event, you know, webhook, a message into a chat room, but we're doing a / command, which has a built-in mechanism in Slack to have a web form natively built in. Right, so within some code, this is really a list of entries that we need to collect from a user, and so we get to put nice little pretty icon here, right? Maybe you want to have some are Mickey, some are Minnie, right? You kind of pick your favorite characters. Again, makes it a bit more fun on getting this integrated to the environment. But you would select your switch interface, same sort of thing. So these are the same exact drop downs that we saw on ServiceNow. The only things that we don't see here are things like the business justification and the reason, and those have been hard coded as well. This is coming from Slack, so it's a real-time change because it's pre-approved. So once we again fill out our fields, we submit this. Then what we end up doing is, then you'll say Mickey Mouse, our back-end lightweight bot comes back to us, kind of regurgitating what we entered. Of course, this is always nice for tracking. Well, saying, oh, what did I click submit there on? What did I do? And so so the Mickey's going to respond back saying, well, all right, well, I got this for you. I'm going to go configure this port for this device type on this device as an example. So what happens here then over the next 2 to 3 minutes, there's a series of messages that will come back to us. We kind of fast forward to this. this is going to open the ServiceNow tickets. This is going to be provided to us directly in chat. We're going to get the link back to our Tower console, and above and beyond that, we're now going to have that show command response. The same response is still written back to ServiceNow, because this is where, and maybe this is a really strict environment, going to have post-check validation built in. Now, ultimately, as I said earlier, this could be pre-check validation, post-check validation, right? So it's really up to you to determine what's possible here. But this is Slack to Ansible Tower. Ansible Tower says, okay, well, let's just open a ticket up to track this, and it still writes those same commands into the ticket status, as an example. Okay, so again, as we said earlier, we're not going to be doing a demo like that. For the most part, is really a static slide show demo. And I really only have, I think it's one more slide, and I tend to use the same slide over and over again for conferences and sessions like this, where there's always kind of a lot of talk around network automation, getting started, and things like that. Keep in mind, right? Ansible is great place to start. You can automate one task on 1,000 devices, 1,000 tasks on one device. Pretty flexibly there. And at the end of the day, there's just, it's still so early in the network automation game, if you will, that I often joke, well, you want to be the automator, not the automated. I think it's still too early, to say where this gets us in 5 or 10 years. But if you're on this webinar, more than likely you're way ahead of the game already. And just keep in mind that different ways can be deployed to consume network automation, as we've shown, right? All driven from a common platform, common API like Tower. And another key point is as folks get started, like to point out where there's some folks like to jump into code. Oftentimes code is what gets somebody inspired, and then you realize very quickly it's not something easy to do. And so I'll always say it's much quicker, easier, and safer to write some production playbooks and run them from Tower than to write production grade code, right? Like they're really two different animals. They're two different things. So that's what I mean by automate when you can, code when you must. Built on our good old analogy on routing and switching. When you can and when you must. But you want to automate when you can, meaning we're saying, well, use Ansible whenever you can, and only when you have to, then maybe extend Ansible or add a custom plugin here or there, but only really if you have to. Okay, and again, higher level, why wouldn't we all want to become a little bit more efficient with how we manage our day to day? But yeah, that's sort of what I had planned. And I guess, Sean, I don't know, are there more questions, more things you want to open up to the audience?
Yeah, so we got some questions. I'm trying to evaluate. Some of them are repeats. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm trying to expand them myself. It's in a little window. I can't even.
Yeah, it's I actually have 2 computers set up. Actually, we have 3 because we're highly redundant here. I got Carrie's on her computer. I got the one that I presented from. Then I have mine where I'm looking at questions because it is a little bit awkward sometimes. So one of the questions is the list of devices in the form from ServiceNow CMDB or Ansible inventory?
Yeah, so great question. And so there's always 2 things. What we've shown here, and full transparency, that what we've shown here was within ServiceNow, because the past few months, like there has been full-blown plugins that came out from ServiceNow to Tower, which feeds directly into the inventory of Tower, as an example. So I would say it's kind of irrelevant potentially for what we did here, just in terms of demo. But again, in terms of this is always like the difference of how easy it is to show a demo, do a demo, versus getting things production ready. But yeah, within production, you'd want to leverage your source of truth for inventory. If you were using dynamic inventory scripts in Ansible, then you want to get from a source of truth, or leverage if Tower has your inventory, leverage Tower's API. So that there's options there.
And just for those on the call that might be new to Ansible, dynamic inventory is a way basically where you could, in fact, have a Git repo as your inventory and import it. You could display all your inventory in Tower if you wanted. Your inventory could be a flat INI file, but a lot of times organizations have existing inventories, right? Why reinvent the wheel? So what Jason was just talking about, dynamic inventory, like you could pull your inventory from Amazon EC2. You could pull your inventory from Infoblox. So whatever happens to be your source of truth, and the source of truth meaning literally like where we store our device information for Ansible to talk to, right? It's that simple. Let me see the next question. Let's see, there's a bunch in here. Jason showed, I'm just kind of reading out loud as I show an example of form. So how is that form linked to the ServiceNow ticket with the appropriate data for the API call to Tower? So I think you're talking about the, how is that information getting from ServiceNow to the API call to Tower? I think that's the question.
Yeah, it makes sense. So in this instance, if we start from the ground up, we have Ansible playbooks that are built, and ultimately, if you were to run a playbook, you have the ability to pass in something called extra vars into the playbook. And if the command line, that could be a command line flag, or through Ansible Tower, you can also be prompted with an Ansible Tower survey as an example. So ultimately, though, what we're doing from ServiceNow is everything that is inputted in that ServiceNow request in that web form is being passed into Ansible Tower, running the right job template, i.e. playbook, and then passing all those fields in as extra vars, right? Extra vars, like, is the thing. It's a real term with Ansible terminology that has the highest priority variable to pass into a playbook. So we're essentially passing in variables into our playbook at runtime, right, and using those to execute the playbook.
Let me see. Someone's asking about I'm going to answer. There's a question about the telnet. This is a pretty common question we get, Jason, when we. So the question was about, is there plans to have a telnet connection model? And no, there are no plans ever to have a telnet connection method. It's just not part of our mission statement for Ansible. We want to do SSH or netcom for the newer stuff. What we try to do is there is a telnet module, and that telnet module can be used to add SSH access or turn something on. But we do not want the primary way we interact with a network device to be telnet. It's just not what modern networks are doing. I understand that there's certain use cases here and there, but it's just not our charter, and it's kind of out of scope for what the network automation team at Ansible wants to do. Pretty much SSH has been around a long time. So the telnet module is used just as a crutch to kind of enable it on devices. We got someone wanting you to demo this to one of their customers already. So I'll show you that info later. So that means someone's super excited, Jason. So at least one person's super excited to the point they want you to get in front of their customer. Let's see if there's anything else interesting in here. One of the questions, what happens if snow change is declined, not approved? I think he kind of touched on that last time. Basically, he's checking if that change has been approved. I don't follow the approval process. The flow showed when the web form was submitted the first time, then the job was scheduled in Tower after the approver approved the ticket. How does that link back to Tower? I think you just covered that again on how it communicates to Tower. Basically, maybe at a high level, I kind of answered this question in the chat, and Jason's alluded to this a few times, but a lot of people think of Tower just as a GUI to manage playbooks, and a lot of times you'll see our engineers kind of slap people if they do that, because the way we explain it is an enterprise framework, which unfortunately is really ambiguous to what that means. But what that kind of means to a lot of people is exactly what Jason showed here today, is that Ansible Tower has a very robust API. Anything I can click in Tower with my mouse through the GUI, I can automate with API call. So why does that matter? That's why Jason showed you, is if you have existing tooling, let's say you're already using ServiceNow to do tasks, you can now use ServiceNow to help automate it. Because ServiceNow isn't a automation platform for network devices, but it can talk to Tower and vice versa to actually implement changes on a network infrastructure. So Tower itself is the kind of API to Ansible playbooks, in addition to having a GUI. And then Tower has other cool stuff in it too, but I think the API is one of the things we try to focus a lot on, just because there are so many tools out there, and Ansible is not going to be the tool that solves all problems. Ansible is automation, and it does automation really, really well, but it's not, we don't think of it as an inventory tool. We don't think of it as a ticketing system, right, for an organization. So we don't try to replace the tools. We want to concentrate on what we're good at, and those tools want to concentrate on what they're good at, and they kind of talk in a structured format between each other using these APIs. Another question, is there any common rollback automation thing, or do we have to run on NAS rollback mechanisms? So it's actually interesting. We are going to have Ansible playbook roles that the community and customers can take advantage of that will include a rollback functionality. That being said, it's still best practice to rely on NAS rollback mechanisms when they're available. Kind of think of Juniper like commit confirm. When you type a command, you might lose connectivity, because obviously if Ansible blows away the management config, we still need a way to talk to it to roll it back, right, if it's halfway through. So we'll start actually having those roles available. Right now, you would have to build the logic into a playbook. You got a big thank you from one of your fans, Jason. And I'll send these questions to you later. And I think we're pretty much out of time. What I'll do is I'll post these questions. What we try to do is get the questions on the webinar. So after this is posted, you guys will have my email, you'll have Jason's email, and obviously like the fastest way to contact, because Jason's a very busy guy, is probably just to go to his website, right? Just Google network to code, it'll come right up and you'll see it. You can contact those guys. They're a partner of Red Hat. They know what they're doing. They want your business. They want to talk to you. We'll take these questions, and over the next week, me and Jason will answer the ones that we haven't answered, and we'll just make a list on the webinar page or a blog post. We'll figure out where we'll put it. This will be recorded, so if you had colleagues that want to see it, I know a lot of people joined late and you might have missed some parts. We'll make sure it gets posted, and it's really just a registration wall. Like if you're already registered and have an account, like it'll be pretty trivial. So with that, Jason, you have any last comment, or are you good?
No, I appreciate the opportunity, Sean, and thank everybody who's joined. And if you have any questions, again, for me, like Sean said, you can find us at networktocode.com, and also email me personally just at jason@networktocode.com.
Bye-bye, everyone. See ya.